Morning, all. All right, so we're up to the 1979-1980 season. As you can see, we now have 21 teams in the league. I've changed the format here. The full 4 foot by 2 foot is being utilized here. No idea what's going to happen when we're up to 30 teams. Maybe I get the even bigger board. I do have a bigger board than this one. Anyways, their divisions still, I don't know why, because they went to a balanced schedule that season. Everybody plays everybody else 4 times. The divisions mean nothing. And to prove that, the playoff system has changed so that it's 1 versus 16, 2 versus 15, a system the NHL likes so much they keep it for 2 years and they pitch it. So the Norris division is won by Montreal. They finished 47, 20, and 13. They score 328 goals. They score 200, or they allow 240 against, 107 points. So still Montreal very good. Under Bernie Geoffrion, or Boom Boom, 15, 9, and 6 record. Then Claude Ruel takes over, 32, 11, and 7 record for Claude Ruel. For the LA Kings, they go 30, 36, and 14, 74 points. So they're 33 points out of first. 290 goals scored, 313 goals against. They're coached by Bob Barry. The Pittsburgh Penguins, 30, 37, and 13 record for 73 points, 251 goals scored, 303 goals against under coach Johnny Wilson. The Hartford Whalers, who had, of course, been New England, and then Boston said no. 27, 34, and 19 records, 73 points, 303 goals scored, 312 goals against. Don Blackburn, the coach in Hartford. The Detroit Red Wings going through some stuff. 26, 43, and 11 record for 63 points. They scored 268 goals. They allowed 303. Bobby Crom goes 24, 36, and 11, and then Ted Lindsay takes over and goes 2 and 7. So, not a great season for the Detroit Red Wings. In the Adams division, Buffalo wins the division. Buffalo finishes with 110 points, a record of 47, 17, and 16 under coach Scotty Bowman. We'll talk about that in a moment. 318 goals scored, 201 goals against. The Boston Bruins go 46, 21, and 13, 105 points for them. 310 goals scored, 234 goals against. Fred Creighton has a record of 40, 20, and 13. Harry Sinden goes 6 and 1 behind the bench that season. The Minnesota North Stars, 36, 28, and 16 record, 88 points, 311 goals scored, 253 goals against under coach Glenn Sonmore. The Toronto Maple Leafs go 35, 40, and 5, 75 points, 304 goals scored, 327 goals against. Floyd Smith goes 30, 33, and 5. Dick Duff, 0 and 2. I get the feeling that, that it's just, it for me in my brain, I conjure Duffman every time I hear Dick Duff. Duckman's different. Punch Imlach goes 5 and 5 behind the bench. So it doesn't really matter who's behind the bench for Toronto. It's not a fantastic season. The Quebec Nordiques, 25, 44, and 11 for 61 points. 248 goals scored, 313 goals against under coach Jacques Demers. The Patrick Division's won by the Philadelphia Flyers, who finished with the league best, 116 points, 48, 12, and 20 record. Pat Quinn is the coach. They scored 327 goals. They allowed 254. They also had an NHL record 35-game unbeaten streak that season. The New York Islanders, 39, 28, and 13 record for 91 points. They scored 281 goals. They allowed 247 against. Al Arbor is their coach. The New York Rangers, 38, 32, and 10 record, 86 points, 308 goals scored, 284 goals against. Fred Shero is now the coach for the New York Rangers. The Atlanta Flames, and this is the last season in Atlanta for those Flames, 35, 32, and 13 record, 282 goals scored, 269 goals against, 83 points. Al McNeil's the coach. The Atlanta Flames just weren't drawing. There wasn't enough interest. I think the lack of a playoff run was part of it. They were a good team, a little bit above average at times, but they just couldn't get over the hump in the playoffs. The Washington Capitals, 27, 40, and 13 record for 67 points, 261 goals scored, 293 goals against under coach Gary Green. The Smythe division's won by Chicago. They have the lowest point total of any division winner because it's the Smythe division. 34, 27, and 19 record, 87 points, 241 goals scored, 250 goals against. Eddie Johnston is now the coach in Chicago. St. Louis, 34, 34, and 12 record for 80 points, 266 goals scored, 278 goals against. Under coach Barclay Plager, 7-14-3 record. Red Berenson takes over and goes 27-20-9. And of course, St. Louis, a year away from potentially moving to Saskatoon. The Vancouver Canucks, 27-37-16 record for 70 points, 256 goals scored, 281 goals against. They're coached by Harry Neal. And the Canucks, while they're not that great, the reality is Harry Neal, one of my favorite coaches that they had, just they couldn't win enough during that era. The Edmonton Oilers go 28-39-13 for 69 points, 301 goals scored, 322 goals against. They're coached by Glenn Sather. The Winnipeg Jets go 20-49-11, and things are going to get worse next season. 51 points for the Jets, 214 goals scored, 314 goals against. Under coach Tom McVie, 19-47-11 record. Bill Sutherland goes 1-2 behind the bench. The Colorado Rockies, coached by Don Cherry, and this is a season that it's a disaster. They go 19-48-13, 51 points, 234 goals scored, 308 goals against. And yeah, that team was bad. That was a really, really bad. So the Whalers, again, renamed Hartford because the Bruins are like, hey, we're in New England. The NHL weakened the WHA teams as they came in. So one thing that bothers me looking back at history is, first off, the NHL not recognizing WHA stats. I kind of get it, but at the same time, it means that WHA stats just disappear. And there were some pretty good players who had good careers in the WHA that can get forgotten, right? But when the WHA teams came in, NHL teams were like, well, actually, that player, we have rights to him, so we'll take him off their hands. We have the rights to that player. And it severely weakened the teams. It's not like they're taking, borderline NHL talent. They're taking pretty darn good players. So it gets kind of ugly. And so that first year for the WHA teams, the Whalers are the closest to 500. The Nordiques struggle, the Oilers, the Jets, they were all weakened as they came in, especially the Jets. So, August 1979, helmets become mandatory unless players sign contracts before June the 1st. So, we really want to have helmets. Everybody needs to wear a helmet, unless you signed a contract before June of this year, and then, you're fine. So Craig McTavish would be the last one who did not wear a helmet in the National Hockey League. December 27th of 1979, the Wings move to Joe Louis Arena from the Olympia. I'm always surprised. I'm surprised too, looking back at how late it was that they went from the Olympia to Joe Louis Arena, since they're not in Joe Louis anymore either. Every team plays every other team 4 times, as I said. The playoffs are 1 versus 16, 2 versus 15. Division winners don't guarantee themselves the top 4 spot. All that fun stuff. So why have divisions? Gretzky. So the WHA, they don't count the stats, but they count the experience. So even though Gretzky's young enough to be a rookie, he's 18 years of age, he does not qualify for the Calder because of his experience in the WHA. So is it a pro league or is it not, NHL? Anyways, so that happens. He's not Calder eligible. He absolutely would have won the Calder if he was. Ken Dryden retired. Scotty Bowman resigned, which ended the Habs dynasty. So Montreal has a good record from 1980 and really through most of the 80s. But without Bowman behind the bench and without Dryden as their goaltender, they do lose something, which they get back once Patrick Waugh is the coach, or once Patrick Waugh is the goaltender. He's a coach now in New York. Anyways, maybe it's the Islanders jersey throwing me off. August 16th of 1979, the Blues signed free agent Joey Mullen. September 28th of 1979, the North Stars signed free agent Dino Ciccarelli, and both would go on to have pretty good careers. March the 10th of 1980 starts the trade deadline. So the trade deadline's a big deal now. Wasn't then. But Butch Goring is traded by the Kings to the New York Islanders for defenseman Dave Lewis and forward Billy Harris. A trade that I'm sure at the time the Kings felt like, well, this could be a good deal for us. But it worked out really well for the Islanders, who started their dynasty in part because of Butch Goring. The Hawks, their 16-game playoff losing streak ends this season, but that 16-game playoff losing streak, which dates back to 1975, does set a National Hockey League record. November 28th of 1979, Billy Smith is credited with a goal. Rob Ramage shot it into his own net. So Rockies defenseman Rob Ramage It's an own goal for him, but Billy Smythe was the last Islander to touch it, and the Islanders won that game 7-4. January 2nd of 1980, Gordie Howe makes history, becoming the first player to have played in 5 decades. And as I've mentioned in a previous video in this series, there was a point where he tried to make that comeback in the 90s to play, and the National Hockey League teams wouldn't sign him for what basically would have been a PR stunt. So he played in the International Hockey League. He played, I think, just the one game, which did get him credited as having played in 6 different seasons, but obviously not at the NHL level. February 24th of 1980, Gretzky is the first player to reach 100 points before age of 20 years of age. So good for him on that one. March 25th of 1980, Pierre LaRouche becomes the first player to score 50 goals for 2 different teams. He scored 50 goals in a season for Pittsburgh, and then this season he does it for Montreal. So the Art Ross Trophy goes to Marcel Dionne. He was tied in points with Wayne Gretzky, but he had more goals. So that's the tiebreaker. The Masterton goes to Al McAdam of the Minnesota North Stars. The Calder goes to Ray Bourque of the Boston Bruins. The Conn Smythe goes to Brian Trottier of the New York Islanders. The Selke goes to Bob Gainey because it belongs to him. It's his trophy. The Hart Trophy goes to Wayne Gretzky. The Jack Adams goes to Pat Quinn of the Philadelphia Flyers. The Norris goes to Larry Robinson of the Montreal Canadiens. So again, Robinson, I start watching hockey 80-81. Robinson's best games and best days were just before I really got into hockey. Lady Byng goes to Wayne Gretzky of the Edmonton Oilers. The Lester Pearson goes to Marcel Dionne of the LA Kings. So it's interesting that the players decided on Dionne as the best player in the NHL, and the press vote goes to Wayne Gretzky of the Edmonton Oilers. The Vezina goes to the combination of Don Edwards and Bob Sauvé of the Buffalo Sabres. So kudos to them there. And of course, I've done a career video on Don Edwards, so that's kind of fun. The All-Stars, your first team All-Star down the middle's Marcel Dionne of the LA Kings. Wayne Gretzky of the Oilers, the second team All-Star. On the right side, Guy Lafleur of the Montreal Canadiens, first team. Danny Gare of the Buffalo Sabres, second team. On the left side, Charlie Simmer of the LA Kings is first team. Steve Shutt of the Montreal Canadiens, the second team. On the blue line, Larry Robinson and Ray Bourque are your first team All-Stars. I don't know. That sounds pretty good. And then your second team All-Stars are Borje Salming of the Toronto Maple Leafs and Jim Schoenfeld of the Buffalo Sabres. He was a pretty good defenseman before he was a coach. In goal, Tony Esposito of Chicago is your first team All-Star. Don Edwards of the Buffalo Sabres is your second team All-Star. So the preliminary round, which is 1-16, 2-15, 3-15, 3-14, all that, it's a best of 5. So, and when I started watching hockey, that's how it was. The Islanders beat Atlanta 3-1. So Atlanta does win a playoff game. They don't win a playoff series, though. And again, they'll be moving to Calgary. The Chicago Blackhawks sweep St. Louis 3-0. Minnesota sweeps Toronto 3-0. The Islanders beat LA 3-1. Boston beats Pittsburgh 3-2. Montreal beats Hartford in 3 straight. Buffalo beats Vancouver 3-1. And that's the first series that I watched in its entirety, was the Buffalo Sabres and Vancouver Canucks. I remember specifically making time to watch those games as a little kid. Philadelphia beat Edmonton 3-0. I didn't really watch much after that. The quarterfinals, because I was like, well, Vancouver's out. Why do I care? So the quarterfinals, the New York Islanders beat Boston 4-1. Minnesota beats Montreal 4-3. So the Minnesota North Stars here knock off Montreal in the quarterfinals and end that Stanley Cup playoff run with 4 straight Stanley Cups. They were going for 5. Buffalo sweeps Chicago 4 games straight. Philadelphia beats the Rangers 4-1, and that brings us to the semifinals. The Islanders and Buffalo. There's a fun series for you. The Islanders win both games in Buffalo by scores of 4-1 and 2-1. They then win 7-4 at home to go up 3-0. So Buffalo fights back into it. They win 7-4 in Game 4. They win 2-0 in Game 5 at home. And then the Islanders say, that's enough of this. We're done. They win 5-2 to win the series 4-2. The Minnesota North Stars and the Philadelphia Flyers. So this is a fun Final Four, going to be honest. Minnesota beats Philadelphia 6-5, and then Philadelphia wins 7-0 in the second game. Philadelphia goes to Minnesota, wins both games by scores of 5-3 and 3-2. And then Philadelphia beats Minnesota 7-3. So the Flyers win 4-1. I just mean it's a fun Final Four because you got Buffalo, the Islanders, Minnesota, and Philly four franchises that, I mean, in the cases of Buffalo and Minnesota, it's kind of a fun underdog story. Anyways, we go to the final. It's the Islanders and the Flyers. So the Flyers last won the Cup in 75. The Islanders looking for their first, and according to the jersey I'm wearing, the Flyers win it. So the Islanders win 4-3 in overtime in the first game. The Flyers win 8-3 in the second game. These are at home. Then at home, the Islanders, they assert themselves. They win 6-2 and 5-2 respectively. The Flyers keep themselves in the series with a 6-3 win. And then the Islanders win in overtime 5-4 on a Bobby Nystrom goal in overtime. The Islanders win the Stanley Cup 4-2. In that Stanley Cup final, Mike Bossy has 4 goals and 7 assists, so really good for him. Potvin, 5 goals, 4 assists. Trottier, 4 goals, 4 assists. Gillies, 2 goals and 6 assists for him. Billy Smith, an .874 save percentage. For the Flyers, Paul Holmgren had 4 goals and 4 assists in that final. Bobby Clark, 4 goals and 3 assists. Brian Propp had 3 goals and 3 assists. And Bill Barber had a goal and 4 assists for the Flyers. Pete Peters, a .873 save percentage. There was something I missed, was the stats. Good thing I caught that, huh? Marcel Dion wins the scoring title, 137 points, 80 games, 53 goals, 84 assists. Wayne Gretzky, 79 games, 51 goals, 86 assists, 137 points. So if we'd had an internet then, it would have been, well, yeah, but if Gretzky played that 80th game, he would have had like 8 points. So he wins. Guy Lafleur, 74 games, 50 goals, 75 assists, 125 points. Gilbert Perreault, 80 games, 40 goals, 66 assists for 106 points. Mike Rogers for the Rangers, 80 games, 44 goals, 61 assists, 105 points. He was one of those ones that got poached from a WHA team. Brian Trottier, 78 games, 42 goals, 62 assists, 104 points. Charlie Simmer with the Kings, 64 games, 56 goals, 45 assists, 101 points. I love Charlie Simmer. He was one of my favorites. Blaine Stoughton, 80 games for the Whalers, 56 goals, 44 assists, 100 points. Mike Liut had himself a year, 32, 23, and 9 record, 3.18 goals against average, 2 shutouts. Tony Esposito, 31, 22, and 6 record, 2.98 goals against average, and 6 shutouts. Pete Peters went 29, 5, and 5. 2.73 goals against average and 1 shutout for the Flyers. Don Edwards in Buffalo, 27, 9, and 12. 2.57 goals against average and 2 shutouts. And Joe Meloche for the Minnesota North Stars, 27, 20, and 5. 3.06 goals against average and 1 shutout. There, now I'm done. I got the whole board done. All done. All right. Let me know your thoughts in the whole comments down below. In the comments down below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I did look back. I just want to throw it there. I did look back at the video I did on the 79-80 season back in 2018. First off, that was 2 moves ago. Secondly, this season was contained on a 3-foot by 2-foot board. But I'm not happy with the way it's presented. I thought the writing on the board looks really scratchy and awful. And yeah, so practice does make my handwriting look better on the whiteboards, and there's more information there for sure. So I do like the series I'm doing now than the one I did originally. But there you go. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.